Hello everybody, and today I'm not doing a review, I'm actually going to be doing a list, and it's going to be the top 10 superhero movies. Now I was thinking about doing a director's list, maybe ranking their films, but I thought I would do a superhero one first. Now I gotta say, before I start this list, know that this is not a personal best superhero films list. I've taken this more of a little bit of my personal opinion, but mostly about how where these movies rank as influential pieces of art and how they've affected superhero movies, how they've pushed the art of superhero movies. So keep that in mind as I go through this list. Number 10, I have X2, the sequel to the original X-Men. Now, obviously, I don't think this film is as good as some of the further X-Men movies that would come along. And while the first X-Men was a very influential film, so it was part of that first wave of what was considered to be good superhero movies, I think that if you look back, you will see that actually the first X-Men is not that good of a movie. It's a little dry, it's a little stale at this point. But X2 actually still holds up as a pretty good superhero movie. And at this point, its influence in that first wave is undeniable, and that's why I put it here at this number 10 spot. The original Christopher Reeve Superman. Now, I think this movie mainly is on this spot because of its influence. It was the first good superhero movie, and it took them a long time to make another one. Now, it is still a good movie, but the problem is that it just shows that they compromised because they had to make it more friendly for the 1970s audience, because back then superhero movies weren't allowed to be comic booky. And that's okay because that's just a product of its time. However, that makes it where it can't hold up to these other films which have come to embrace superhero movies. Because when I decided to make this list, I decided to make it where I put it more about how these movies represent the superhero genre and how they pushed it forward, along with being obviously good movies. And while this movie is a very good movie, it is not as superhero-y as some of the other ones here. At number 8, I have Spider-Man 2. Now, I put this movie in this spot for many of the same reasons I put X2 at the 10 spot. This one improved on the original Spider-Man of Tobey Maguire, but I had to put it a little bit higher because I think that this movie captures the essence of superhero movies a little better than X2. And this is probably just a little bit of a better movie than X2. It was part of that similar first wave of truly good comic book movies, and I think it's probably the most influential from that period, which is why I put it here at number 8. But when you look back once again, it still has a little bit of a compromisation because it couldn't be full out comic book-y, and that's why I kind of place it here. And I do think this is a great movie, but it's why it doesn't rank a little higher on this list. Yes, at number 7, I actually have two movies, X-Men Days of Future Past and X-Men First Class. Mainly because I think that these two movies both were able to perfect the X-Men movies, and even though the originals have very good moments and they're overall pretty good movies, these are the two movies that truly capture what I think are the essence of the X-Men movies. Yes, they don't have some of the most beloved characters that the originals do, but let's be real here, those characters were underwritten and boring anyways, at least the way they're portrayed in those movies. However, here even though we may have some B-list characters, they're more fleshed out, more well written, and by the time we get to Days of Future Past, we have just all of the amazing old characters mixed with the new characters, and at this point, I think that these two films are just absolutely fantastic. And even though they're maybe not as influential as the three I just mentioned, I think that the fact that they're so good and they were able to perfect the formula created on X2, I think that they have to land a little higher on this list. But that's why I also couldn't put them any higher than 7. At number 6, we have Christopher Nolan's first foray into directing the Batman movies with Batman Begins. Now, this is a great movie, of course it is, and it allows Christopher Nolan to take these characters into a dark place, which is why this movie is as influential as it is. Now, it has some negative problems because of this, It has caused the incredibly self-serious DCEU, which at this point just needs some freaking levity. But you can't really blame that on Batman Begins. And this movie, unlike The Dark Knight, has more comic book elements to it. With the whole Ra's al Ghul and the ninjas thing. Sure, it's not as out there as some of the things that are in the comic books, but it just still has a little bit of a hold on the comic book world, even though we are still very much in a contemporary time in this movie. It is a very great and fun movie to watch, and I think that's why I placed it at number 6, because it's just great and it's influential. Number 5 is the movie that probably is the most controversial on this list, and that would be Captain America Winter Soldier. Not because is this movie good, but why is this movie so high, Douglas? Well, personally, it's part because this is my favorite comic book movie ever, and I think that this movie is easily the best out of any of the Marvel movies, and really out of any of the comic book movies. But I didn't put it at number 1, because I recognize this film's influence is not nearly as large as some of the other films on this list. However, I do think this movie has some undercurrents that should be affecting other movies, and it doesn't seem like it is right now, but I think it will in the future. Number 1, I love how this movie is truly the first superhero spy movie, which is something that we haven't really seen in the other Captain America movies, as good as the other two are. And I think that this movie, outside of maybe the Christopher Nolan series, is the one that brings up the most moral and political questions out of any of them. But it also is able to bring the Marvel tone that the other Batman movies didn't, which are so self-serious and dour, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But it's interesting to see that Marvel placing these philosophical questions within its own universe. And I think that's what creates this film and gives it such its power as a film, and I think that's why I put it this high. And number 4, we have the original Iron Man, and at this point it really just depends on where you place these movies, because all of them are just powerhouses and incredibly important pieces of art. Not just superhero movies, but pieces of art. And Iron Man is a fantastic movie. Yes, this is actually not one of my favorite Marvel movies. It's actually about middle of the pack, and that's just because Marvel has put out so many great movies at this point. But when I put it at the middle of the pack, you gotta understand that a lot of this is because of its influence, why it lands so high on this list. Because Marvel has really outdone themselves, and they have really created a business formula that people are now trying to copy left and right. Obviously DC, but also they're trying to make that monster share universe with the Mummy that's coming up soon. And now Sony's trying to do a Spider-Man-less shared universe with some of the side characters like Venom. And none of this would be happening if Marvel didn't take this incredibly ambitious idea and pay it off so well. Which brings me to... At number 3, we have Marvel's The Avengers. And this is where all of the hype paid off. Because Joss Whedon, he had one job, and it was to not screw this up. And instead of doing that, he actually exceeded his expectations, because he created a fantastic movie and showed that you can balance all of these characters and make it feel real because of the relationships and how the dynamics work with each other, how they clash, how they work together. And it just ended up being a fantastic movie. And now it seems so quaint because Marvel has pulled it off time and time again. But at the time, this movie was revolutionary. And I remember this is actually the first Marvel movie I saw. I had never seen the original Iron Man until after I had seen the Avengers. And this movie was just awesome. I didn't know a thing about any of these characters, and it all just felt so real, and it felt so... It just felt like a comic book. And that's what's so great about this film, and it's why it's still one of the best superhero movies of all time. Number 2, we have Christopher Nolan's second outing with the Batman franchise with The Dark Knight. Now, some will probably ask, why is this not number 1? I would agree. This is probably the best film with a superhero in it. Now, I would probably say personally it's not my favorite film, even if you count this as a superhero movie, which it technically is, which is why it makes this list. But this film has stripped almost all of the superhero elements out of the film. The stuff with Ra's al Ghul and all of that group are gone. It's all gone. Now it's just crime and a guy in a batsuit. And yeah, it's a fantastic movie. However, it doesn't even feel like a superhero movie. And that's why I gave it its due. I put it at number 2 on this list. But I couldn't put it at number 1. Because even though it might be superior to some of the films I put before it, it's not as good of a superhero movie. Because this movie is not about a superhero. It's about a normal dude who dresses like a bat. And while it is a great movie, it's just not a good comic book movie. At number 1, we have Captain America: Civil War. Yes, this movie is my number 1 film in this list. Because I think that this movie is the one that captured the essence of comic books the most. Yes, it might not be as good as a couple other movies on this list. I don't even think it's as good as maybe 2 or 3 of the movies before this. However, it's in the top 5 superhero movies of all time. I think we go just based on how good it is. But also we have to look at it as an achievement. And as an achievement, this film is the most like a comic book a film has ever become. And I think that earns it props over almost every superhero movie ever. And of course on my list is the number 1 superhero movie of all time because of those reasons. And obviously it's just a great film. The Russo brothers found a way to balance all of these characters even more than there were in the original Avengers, and make them all work. Make them all work together. Make them all clash in a real convincing way. Yes, it's a little self-indulgent, but characters like Spider-Man add so much to this movie that the 15 minutes that are added because of his presence don't even really feel like they're added for no reason. They just feel like a natural part of this film, which is something that I can even say about the Avengers at times. Yes, the movie is great, but it's not the tightest movie that it could be. And this film's not tight either, but everything feels so necessary because it feels like a comic book. And that's why I put it at number 1 on this list. Feel free to disagree. I don't care. It's my list. But of course, I do want to know what your all's lists are. And you can tell me down in the comment section below, because I want to see what you all have to say about this. I do want to give, though, a couple of honorable mentions real quick. First off, Logan. I think it's a little too early to put it on here, but I think in terms of objectively, you could easily put it in the top 10. I probably would put it in my personal top 10. Fantastic movie. Took the Wolverine character to new depths. Took him to new highs in terms of quality. It was a fantastic film. Also, the first Guardians of the Galaxy, I do prefer the new one a little bit more, but the first one was just so different and special, and it's already created an offshoot like Suicide Squad that was so inferior to it. It tried to do the soundtrack thing. It failed. Guardians is a fantastic movie, and I just couldn't put it on here because I don't think it's as good as some of the films on here, but it is a great film. Also, Deadpool, mainly because, one, it's the first comedic superhero movie. Also, the first, I think the first R-rated one, or at least the first successful R-rated superhero movie. And of course, that created what we have now in Logan. And that film, I could have easily put on here, but I just don't think it has the influence yet, because I don't think it's as good, but it could get there. It could definitely get there. It could definitely break this top 10 in maybe 5 years. And that's going to do it for this list. Thank you all for watching. And like I said in the last segment, I want you all to comment down below, tell me what your list is. And like this video if you like it, and subscribe to my channel if you want to get more great content. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.